Hello and welcome to our webcast for April 6, 2018. My name is Christian Debré and this is Amy Asbrook, the director of Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet.
Hello.
Also joining us is Taylor Ayat, our outreach policy analysis and coordinator.
Hi, everyone.
Sorry, I do crossover word. Our policy analysis and our outreach coordinator.
Yeah.
Okay, Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet is a non-religious organization by and for people with disabilities and our allies. Our goal is to inform, unify, and give voice to disability rights opposition, to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending of life practices that discriminate against people with disabilities. Today's topics, we have two, okay? First one is how assisted suicide and euthanasia are changing the way we think, part two. Because we have part one just last time. And the second one is Autism Awareness Month. Don't light it up blue. Amy Asbrook will help you about. So should
wait. Okay. All right. Today we're picking up where we left off last week, exploring how the legalization of assisted suicide and euthanasia have changed the way our society responds to people who want to die. Okay, so the next change of the way we're thinking is that exceptional measures have become response to an urgent need. In Quebec especially, euthanasia was sold as an exceptional measure for exceptional cases. The Minister of Health estimated that there would be perhaps 100 cases per year. So imagine their surprise when there were over 700 requests in the first year and nearly 1,000 in the second year of program.
And still increasing every month.
Yes. These resulted in 469 euthanasia in 2016 and 638 in 2017. It's likely that in making their estimates, politicians didn't take into account the probable effect of inadequate palliative care and self-directed home care services on the demand for assisted suicide and euthanasia. Because as we know, loss of autonomy is the top reason people ask for assisted suicide. And when you don't have access to palliative care and you don't have access to home-based personal assistance services, you lose your autonomy and get forced into an institution. So,
which
nobody likes.
Yeah, that's nobody. Some people
not
like
many
it,
people like
but
it.
Not many like it. Yeah.
It's a loss of autonomy.
Yeah.
Once the numbers came out, politicians and the media changed gears, ignoring the lack of palliative care and claiming the system that the problem was not enough access to euthanasia. Instead of trying to figure out why so many people are asking to die, they put pressure on the Commission on End-of-Life Care to figure out how to eliminate barriers, also known as safeguards, to euthanasia. This sidetracked the already overloaded Commission's function of monitoring the program.
Yeah. This commission was created by law to do a survey about assisted killing.
Right, to keep statistics on the program and to make sure that it was being implemented properly, that the safeguards were being used properly.
And the government itself chose to not respect its own law and divert this committee by asking them to look at other functions.
Right, and another example in which the government didn't follow its own law was that the second doctor be independent of the first when there were too many incidents of the second doctor not being independent of the first.
Yeah.
So rather than enforcing the law, It
and
changed
solving
the
the problem,
right,
which is possible.
right,
They choose to eliminate the rule.
The
So
requirement.
no rule, no requirement, no fail.
right. In a Republican, vulnerable person is being redefined to mean a person who doesn't get assisted suicide and euthanasia as quickly or easily as they want. Did you want to say something?
Something I was thinking about was how would the legalization put the idea to end one's life into the mind of someone who otherwise would not be thinking that way? And
Yeah.
if you build it, they will come, sort of thing.
Yeah, yep. That's definitely possible. Okay, another change is that eligibility criteria have become grounds for unjust discrimination. Part of the effort to broaden access to assisted suicide and euthanasia has been redefining eligibility criteria as unjust and discriminatory. This is the driving force behind the Lamb and Truchon cases, which challenge the reasonably foreseeable death and end-of-life eligibility criteria in the federal and Quebec assisted suicide and euthanasia laws.
Which are the main criteria.
Right. That's very important. After having a irremediable medical condition, it's pretty much the second most important criteria. Rather than challenging the discriminatory public policies that deprive people of the supports they need to live in the community, Julia Lamb, Jean Truchon, and Nicole Gladu, all of whom have non-terminal disabilities, are reinforcing the prejudice that life with a disability is a fate worse than death as a means to expand access to assisted suicide and euthanasia to people with disabilities. So basically they're saying, my life sucks because I'm disabled and I'm losing autonomy and I might have to go into a nursing home and blah, blah, blah. And not making the connection that those are public policy issues, not issues caused by their disability.
Yeah.
So
for us, it's obvious. I couldn't understand why people could not see it clearly.
Because it's easier to blame disability than it is to blame society.
Yeah, it's easier. I agree.
And 2 out of those 3 have acquired their conditions later in life. They're not used to finding the help they need. They don't know where to look for it. And so it's easier to say that their body is failing them and not society.
Oh,
Did you think that their grief was not finished?
yeah, the grieving process. I don't know if it was a matter that their grieving process wasn't finished, but we'll see. Let's see. The characteristic that should disqualify the plaintiffs would be redefined as an eligibility criterion, and that's scary. That's basically making disability as an eligibility criteria for assisted suicide. And we kind of already know that that's the case, because when they talk about irremediable medical condition, that basically is referring
to everybody who suffers from an handicap.
Right, exactly. But, they're trying to make it so it's only people who have a terminal illness, but these people are challenging that eligibility criterion and saying it's discriminatory.
But anyway, everybody have a terminal illness. Everybody is born
alive. Yeah. And the real. I lost my point. Oh well. In Quebec, a law on access to end-of-life care becomes a law for access to euthanasia. So another hallmark of the selling of assisted suicide in Quebec was the claim that the central purpose of the statute was to guarantee the right to high quality end-of-life care, such as palliative care and, by the way, medical aid and dying. In the statute, The definition of medical aid in dying refers to administering drugs to a person to, quote, relieve their suffering by hastening death, unquote. So it's supposed to be about relieving suffering, but yeah.
To feel the relieving,
right,
you must be alive.
Be alive, yeah. Though the Quebec statute defines palliative care as providing services to ease a person's suffering without delaying or hastening death, and the law does not require private hospices to euthanize people, hospices and palliative care units have nevertheless been pressured by the government and media to provide euthanasia.
Against his own law.
Right, exactly. They're acting contrary to their own law. And that's not very democratic.
Not really.
No. As we said earlier, the government has emphasized access to euthanasia at the expense of palliative care. Though some funds were committed to hospice care when the law was adopted, about $15 million, this funding was not maintained, and hospice have been pressured to perform euthanasia. As well, cuts to home care services have increased the number of people forced into institutions.
Yeah, and even this 15 million is just a drop of water in the sea.
Yeah, yeah. It hasn't been enough to make any long-term improvements in palliative care, and people, there's still only. Palliative care is still only available to, under a third of the population.
It's approved by demonstration. The access to palliative care doesn't have changed, and it even diminished.
Right, exactly. Okay, another way that our thinking has changed is that death is now considered a pain reliever. Relieving pain involves interrupting a process where electrical signals are passed along nerves up the spinal cord to produce a chemical reaction in the brain. And while death is certainly one way to interrupt those signals, it cannot be said to be pain relief because the person no longer exists to experience the relief from pain. Yet, the phrase used in the Quebec statute, relieving suffering by hastening death, perpetuates the myth that death is the most effective pain reliever. It's not pain relief.
No, not at all, because
if you have no signals coming to your brain, that's not pain relief.
Yeah, and there's no brain to.
There's no pain, no but there's nobody to feel it.
No pain, no brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sort of goes along with that idea that when you die, you sort of go off and you go to sleep, or you fly away, or you go to another place. It's, people believe, have beliefs, but frankly, it's sort of self-delusion.
And if we talk about religion, if you take your own life, you go where? You go to hell.
Right. So. Okay, the next one is some of the suicides that are linked to assisted suicide and euthanasia have been influenced by it. Promoters of assisted suicide and euthanasia claim that it will curb the unregulated practice of involuntary euthanasia and that relieving people's suffering will decrease the number of suicides. But this is not the case. The rate of suicides has increased in Oregon since the Death with Dignity law came into effect in 1998 and is higher than the national average. Suicides have not decreased in Belgium or the Netherlands, despite the growing number of euthanasia performed with and without consent.
Yeah. They kill people without consent.
Right.
In my book, we call it murder.
Right. Assisted suicide and euthanasia seems to be changing people's attitudes towards suicide as well. And here are some examples. In March of 2016, Quebec's Collège des Médecins had to post an advisory to its members concerned, emergency room doctors did not revive people who had attempted suicide. Therefore, the suicides were completed. The advisory reminded doctors that they had a duty to intervene to save lives, even if the person was not able to provide explicit consent. That once stabilized, the person should be provided with mental health support and treatment, and that treatment can only be withheld if the person has signed a do not resuscitate order or a similar advance directive. So
and even that, it's not very good.
Right. So a person attempting suicide is not the same as saying, I'm refusing or withdrawing care.
No, it's a call for help.
Yes. Okay, another example of how it's changed the way we look at suicide. The family of Gabrielle Alexandre respected her decision, quote unquote, to commit suicide by parking her car in front of a train in the fall of 2016. The 76-year-old woman was having difficulty walking, increasing pain, and was afraid of having to go into a nursing home.
Exactly like my mom.
Right, exactly. And, again, this is the loss of autonomy thing, number one reason. Her daughter sympathized with Gabrielle's desire not to sponge off society, which, if you've lived your life, you've paid your taxes, you are owed, a reasonable standard of living, and sticking somebody in a nursing home is not a reasonable standard of living.
You're not allowed on the society.
Right, exactly.
You are giving a lot, you just take back the limit.
Right. The article describing the coroner's findings quoted Quebec's health minister as saying, choosing to end your life before the suffering becomes intolerable is not allowed in the current federal law, and I strongly doubt that it will change anytime soon, end of quote. So I think he surely meant to say choosing to have someone else end your life is not allowed, although suicide is not prohibited. Because, again, they're confusing this idea that if somebody else does it to you, it's the same as you're doing it yourself, which is what we're going to talk about next.
But just before we go there, where are the suicide prevention organizations? At least one major...
I agree with you. Where they are.
Well, they're
suicide is a suicide.
They're the ones who are saying that bought into this idea that assisted suicide doesn't really count as suicide because it's disabled people doing it.
What it is, a suicide is a suicide.
Right.
Except that's not what they say. They say that one is a well thought out, premeditated choice that's peaceful and you can have your family present, and the other is traumatizing and shocking and sudden.
Right.
They don't want to admit that there might be some prejudice going on.
That's what we talked about last week, because the Canadian Association for Suicide Prevention's infographic, the reasons they give aren't really legitimate reasons for the difference. And then when you look at the reasons, the risk factors for suicide versus the reasons given by people who request assisted suicide, they're almost identical. So I think that the suicide prevention people have just drunk the Kool-Aid that was served up by the euthanasia promoters. Okay, so active passivity or passive activity, or having something done to you equals doing that thing yourself. There are two ways that this comes up in the assisted suicide and euthanasia discussion. First is the proposition that refusing or withdrawing medical treatment is the same as being euthanized.
Which is not the same at all.
This is not true, but that's that proposition came up in the Carter case.
Yeah.
And though this argument was legally settled by the Carter case, in that sense, reasonable people like us continue to disagree. These reasonable people believe that when medical treatment is withheld or withdrawn, the person's underlying illness or condition is what causes death. Assisted suicide and euthanasia, on the other hand, are proactive interventions where a poison is introduced into the person's body for the purpose of causing death, either by the person, him or herself, as in assisted suicide, or by another person, which is euthanasia. They can hide behind euphemisms and wordplay, but the difference between withholding and withdrawing treatment and assisted suicide and euthanasia should be as clear as the difference between passive and active.
And here's where the popular image of feeding or breathing supports come in. They're portrayed as these painful, invasive, oh, I could never live long term that way, but people do every day.
Right, exactly. Diane Coleman from Not Dead Yet in the US uses a BiPAP all the time now, which helps her breathing. Christiane and I use CPAP machines every night, to help our breathing. So it's
doing good result.
Not intrusive. On the other hand, we hear my life, my body, my choice. Doctor, would you please find me eligible and kill me? So that's a contradiction.
And it is a bit selfish. Me, myself, and I.
Yeah. Assisted suicide and euthanasia promoters equate having a doctor administer a lethal injection with taking one's own life. And it's harder to maintain that illusion of control when there is a risk of being determined ineligible, hence the pressure to remove safeguards and eligibility criteria. Because they're pretending that they're in control by saying my life, my choice, my whatever. But in fact, they're not in control because it's up to the doctor if they're eligible.
Yeah, they give the control to the doctor.
Right, right. And it's necessary to do it that way if you're going to have an assisted suicide or euthanasia law. But the reason they're attacking the safeguards is because they don't want to be out of control. So true self-determination would require people to find and use their own means of self-destruction. But perhaps that is not what people are really looking for. So that ultimately is the question. When people say my life, my choice, my whatever, and they're saying, I don't want to lose autonomy, what are they really saying? Maybe they're really asking for support in their distress and for the wish that their distress would end. These are reasonable demands, but since society is not meeting them and people don't have the energy to fight for the treatment they need when they're in a bad way, they take the easiest and quickest way out, even if it puts many other people in danger.
Oh yeah, a lot of people.
Right.
Everybody who have the same symptom, the same look, and they want to live, but the message is, no, your life doesn't work so much.
Right. Our colleague, John Kelly, was just in the hospital with pneumonia, and all the people, all the various doctors and nurses who came by to see him, he was fortunate that none of them decided that his life was not worth living. And part of the reason for that is that he always had somebody with him to say that. But, of all there were so many people who came, and any one of them could have made that decision. And there was nothing he could have done about it,
So it's freeing to be in the hospital when you are sick and disabled.
Yeah.
At least they asked me when I was in his position.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least I'm still young and healthy and have something to contribute to the world.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm old and past due a little bit. So it's dangerous for me.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're getting some gray hair.
Yeah, I'm getting a few grays here.
So, yeah.
My past due date is, my shelf life is short now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
So looking to the future, the changes we've already seen appear to lead in one of two directions. In one, the public policy replaced with the so-called self-determination, where everyone has easy access to a painless, quick, and inexpensive means to commit suicide.
Yeah, suicide for everybody.
There have been all kinds of science fiction stories and speculative fiction stories that have talked about that, and it's been the subject of such fiction for a long time, and for a long time it was considered absolutely unreasonable. What is it? Soylent Green is people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A good film. Yeah. A very good film.
So that's one possible outcome. Another possibility is that assisted suicide and euthanasia will continue to be directed at old, ill, and disabled people, though the criteria will be expanded to include children, incompetent persons, and those whose suffering is purely psychological. And that's what is considered now in Canada.
Who says they're not going to eventually do both?
Right, exactly. Right. When and how the pendulum might swing back toward valuing the lives of people with disabilities is harder to predict.
Yeah.
Because, after the Second World War and the Nazi extermination of people, this pendulum definitely swung away from eugenics for a while. And that was great. But, I have a hard time imagining what kind of event would move people these days, because they're so desensitized to this idea of death on demand that I don't know what would move people. So, okay. Anything else on that, Taylor, before we go on to our second topic?
Nope.
It's clear. The minding of people is changed by a propaganda.
Yeah.
Okay. Very easy to see when you look those things together, okay, as opposite one to another, and the changing is evident.
Right.
And dangerous.
Yeah, and propaganda is what has underlay the policies and programs of the euthanasia promoters for the last 30 years.
And the trouble is they bet over sentiment and sensing.
Right.
Our analysis is based on scientific things and referral.
Yeah.
And it seems to have no effect. Nobody look at the reality, they just look at what appears.
Right. Okay. Our second.
What I can see is experience being pitted against experience. My experience over here is a healthy, happy life, but the next person is suffering, and who are you to say that those are two different things? Who are you to judge one?
Right, exactly. And we're not saying that people are not suffering. What we're saying is that the reason people are suffering is because of public policies that are making them suffer. It's not their disabilities that are making them suffer. So, and the lack of education of doctors in providing palliative care.
Yeah, most doctors are not trained about pain.
Pain medication, yeah. Okay, let's move on. Autism Awareness Month. Don't light it up blue. April 2nd marks World Autism Awareness Day and the start of World Autism Month. The color blue will show up on puzzle pieces, sweaters, and even famous landmarks as well-meaning people attempt to support the autistics in their lives. Unfortunately, this Light It Up Blue campaign is led by Autism Speaks, an organization run by relatives of and professionals who work with autistics.
Where are the autists over there?
Yeah, that's the first question that also.
What really unnerved me was I learned their slogan this week. Autism speaks, so it's time to listen. Disorders don't speak, conditions don't speak, disabilities don't speak, people do.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right, and they're not even the people who have the condition. let's see.
So the base is overrated is very, very, very bad for autism.
Yeah. Autism Speaks is a great example of every possible problem that can occur when disability advocacy is not carried out by people with disabilities.
Yeah.
So nothing about us without us. There's a reason for that, and Autism Speaks is an exemplar of all those reasons.
Yeah.
Autism Speaks is one of many disability-specific groups run by people who do not actually have the condition they are supposed to represent. Autism Speaks announced its priorities early on when they merged with organizations that focused on research to find a cure for autism. Until 2016, one of the main goals outlined in the Autism Speaks mission statement was, quote, funding global biomedical research into the causes, prevention, treatment, and a possible cure for autism. You know, they used to do the same thing about homosexuality.
Yeah.
And we have come to understand that homosexuality is just a different way of being.
Yeah, it's not a defect.
And that's what the autistics are saying. This is just a different way of being. It's not a defect. And, you know, stop with the cure thing, okay?
Yeah. The afterward cure.
Right, exactly. Now the mission statement talks about researching causes and better interventions, but they still suggest a disorder that needs to be prevented. Only about 5% of Autism Speaks funding goes to support services that autistics need to live in the community. And that's exactly what Muscular Dystrophy Association used to do.
And it was a catastrophe.
Right. They put all their money toward research for a cure. Nothing happened because there's no cure for muscular dystrophy. And a lot of people who needed services and assistance didn't get it, even though they were, you know, raising money hand over fist. People didn't get what they needed, and that was unfortunate. Autism Speaks also promotes the belief that parents of autistics have difficult lives because of the children's neurodiversity. As a 2009 promotional video put it, parents of autistics will be left with a failing marriage, be bankrupt, have no social life, and will even be robbed of their kids. While parents may not expect to have an autistic child, autism is not a monster who stole a typical kid and replaced them with a defective one. But, you know, that's the way they like to portray it. And again, this is just exactly like they used to talk about muscular dystrophy. Autism Speaks would have parents love the kid but hate the autism. But you can't separate autism or any disability from the person, their identity, and their experience of the world. And that is especially true for conditions that are present at birth, because you grow up, you understand who you are in the world based on who you are. And if your condition is autism or you're legally blind and, you know, those things are part of who you are, your parents can't say, well, we like that part, but we don't like that part. That doesn't work.
No.
Okay. Autism Speaks promotes applied behavioral analysis, or ABA, an intervention that is designed to make autistic people appear normal. It includes forced compliance with neurotypical behaviors like eye contact, suppression of self-regulation like stimming, and essentially eliminating any visible signs of autism. And when I was also, people who are blind have a lot of those behaviors too. And when I was a kid, I had them really a lot. I rocked a lot. I moved my head back and forth. My family had this campaign to make me stop doing those things and would just constantly be on my back. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. And, you know, I understand their intention, and it was a good intention, but the problem is that, you know, it made me feel like I was bad. And that probably wasn't what they wanted that probably wasn't what they intended, but that's what happened. And, you know, if people can just accept that some people do these things, good.
Yeah.
Okay. In response to the ABA, oops, did I skip something? No. Okay. Yeah, I did skip something. Many autistic adults have come forward to talk about the trauma ABA has caused and the healing they're seeking years later. So this project of constantly being on the backs of the kids, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. You know, these are kids who the world is overstimulating them. And when they're constantly being badgered, that doesn't help. And it's traumatizing. And a lot of people are saying, this really hurt me. So there are a lot of people are having to work very hard to get over that.
Yeah, autists were traumatized.
Yeah.
And are still traumatized by doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But, you know,
looks like I missed something too. A lot of this campaign, I've seen people openly talk about their autistic siblings on social media when the siblings writing are neurotypical. They just openly divulge these sensory sensitivities and the problems it caused in the house growing up. The siblings feel pressure to achieve things that the autistic siblings supposedly can't. This campaign isn't for them. It's for neurotypical people to be praised, and a lot of these well-meaning people have no idea that that's what they're doing. That's what they're saying.
And yeah, I mean, it can be difficult sometimes to be the sibling of a person with a disability, and people need support around dealing with that. But disclosing personal information about your disabled sibling isn't the way to do it. In response, neurodiversity advocates have created campaigns like Tone It Down Taupe or Red instead. They're promoting acceptance and pride in neurodiversity instead of erasure as the real answer. Anyone who wants to create meaningful change can consult groups run by autistics and leave the blues behind. And we have you can visit on Facebook, the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network at facebook.com/autistic advocacy for more information.
Yeah, this is group of autists who work for autists.
Yeah, people by and for autistics.
Don't like it blue.
Yeah, forget the blue.
Yeah.
Okay. If you, Taylor, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I don't think I made myself clear earlier. The response to the posts from these neurotypical siblings is usually not, we should help the autistic sibling with their sensitivities. It's, oh, what a good sister you are for putting up with all that.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, people were wanting to get patted on the back for just not being assholes.
Yeah.
I said a bad word. Okay.
But I don't think there is other word.
Yeah. Okay, for more information on the subjects that we've discussed here, you can go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/toujours vivant, not dead yet. You can also visit our website at tvndy.ca. You can email us at info@tv-ndy.ca, or you can follow us on Twitter @TVNDY. Thanks to Christian for helping out, and also to Taylor. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thanks to all of you for being here, and we will see you next time.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.